What's up, everybody, and welcome to our first episode of the 10-7 MMA Show. My name is Huzefa Kapadia, and you probably don't have any idea who I am because I'm just a fan. But we're joined also with Justin James, a professional mixed martial artist, which is super cool. And just to give you a quick heads up, the way that I know Justin is we've trained together. He's trained me in Vegas. He trains at Extreme Couture with a lot of big names, and which is super cool. And so we trained there. We became buddies. And again, I'm just a fan, been wanting to talk about the sport on a platform like this for a really long time. So we figured we're going to team up and kind of do this together. And by the way, just a heads up, I'm no expert, right? I'm just a fan, but I love the sport so much. So Justin is going to be just kind of my expert that I'm going to go to with a lot of my questions, and that's going to be the format of the show. And so Justin, before we kind of jump into what we're going to talk about today on our very first show, why don't you tell everybody just kind of your background, how long you've been training, where you're from, etc.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, originally I'm from Detroit, Michigan, or a small farming town about an hour north of Detroit, Michigan called Richmond, Michigan. I started my MMA journey when I graduated high school in 2007. It didn't take very long. I had my first fight after 2 weeks of training. And as expected, jumping into a different sport you've never done before, I lost. I got submitted by a guillotine choke in the first round as an amateur. But after an extensive amateur career, 50 amateur fights in 2012, I turned professional. I moved out to Las Vegas to continue my career, continue my passion for the sport. And luckily in 2020, I was picked up by the UFC. And the rest is history, man. I've had 75 MMA fights. I wrestled in college. I'm a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. I fought in Bellator. Like I said, I fought in the UFC. So a plethora of experience. I'm not going to say that I'm a great fighter, but I play one on TV.
And then what would you say? So what if you had to say your like favorite element of the sport in terms of grappling, wrestling, kickboxing, like where do you feel the most comfortable?
Are you talking referring to the art? Which art I feel the most comfortable in?
Yeah.
Well, coming from a wrestling background, you would think that my ground game would be my most comfortable. But honestly, I've been around the sport for so long. I'm going on 15, 16 years of evolutionizing my boxing, my kickboxing, my wrestling, my grappling. Honestly, I'm just comfortable with the sport of MMA. If we're on the feet striking, if we're kicking, if we're grappling, if we're wrestling, personally, I feel the strongest on my feet. I got big cinder blocks for hands, and when I touch people on the chin, they go to sleep.
Awesome. All right. Super cool. So let's get into some of these topics because there's a lot of stuff going on in the world of mixed martial arts right now. The first thing that we're going to talk about is this crazy light heavyweight fight that happened just this last Saturday in Rio de Janeiro. And it was, I couldn't wait. I was super excited about it. And I think the result was kind of interesting. And I think a lot of people weren't expecting that type of fight. So I want to talk about Jamahal Hill versus Teixeira. And yeah, just kind of get your initial reactions. Like, first of all, was it what you expected?
Honestly, man, Jamahal Hill is a personal friend of mine. We're both from Michigan. We both grew up on the regional scene together. We fought on the same show a couple times, unknowingly at the time, that we'd both be in the UFC come 10 years later. But Jamahal Hill is an athlete amongst athletes. You know what I mean? Like, when I saw the Glover Teixeira versus Jamahal Hill matchup, I thought it was going to be a tough one for him. But Jamahal Hill continues to impress me. He continues to show his evolution of the sport. He continues to show his athleticism. Jamahal Hill put almost 300 strikes on Glover Teixeira for 5 rounds. That just doesn't happen. That's just unheard of right now. Yes, I thought Jamahal was going to win. I was able to put some cash on him. I thought he was going to put him away. But on the flip side of that, let's look at Glover Teixeira. Let's look at the toughness of how this guy absorbed almost 300 strikes from Jamahal Hill. And Jamahal Hill is a clean knockout artist. Hats off to Glover, man. He's 42, 43 years old. He's getting in there mixing up with this young buck, Jamahal Hill, who is an outstanding athlete, an outstanding fighter. And to absorb that kind of damage is just unheard of these days.
It was nuts. I was watching because I watched the fight. Actually, I had to watch it the next day on Sunday. So I was watching the replay and watching the whole thing through, and it was crazy. It was his accuracy. I don't remember the stats, but his accuracy must have just been through the roof. And then what do you think about I mean, what first of all, I think somebody was mentioning that there were some records broken for like a title fight and the number of strikes landed. I can't remember exactly, but like, what is it from a fighter's perspective that makes somebody like Glover be so resilient, be able to absorb all those strikes and still keep going, get a takedown in the 5th round? I mean, that was insane.
I mean, we're talking about pure heart, guys. Both of these fighters at one point were exhausted beyond belief. So, Glover probably sees it as his last chance at a title, man. He's not going to give it up. He's worked his ass off his whole life trying to get this pinnacle of the sport. And, guys like Glover that, have persevered, especially with the age, especially with the injuries. Although we don't know all the injuries he had, but I mean, he's 42 years old, 43 years old. He's not getting through a full fight camp without getting banged down a little bit. I genuinely think it was Glover's heart that took him through that 5th round. And, he put him in a position to where, if you remember correctly, in the 5th round, Jamahal Hill was on his back and Glover Teixeira, a world-class fighter, was mounted. I mean, I just can't give both of these guys enough credit. Glover had no chance of giving up there. It would have been easy for him to just give up his back and let it choke or let the doctor stop it by cut. But he was there to fight for 25 minutes, and that's what he did. And hats off to Jamahal Hill when he found himself in an adverse spot in the 5th round. He was able to fight out of it and avoid submission.
It's unbelievable. It was such an amazing fight. And by the way, I forgot to mention to everybody. So Justin's from Michigan, Jamal's from Michigan. I'm from Michigan too, actually. And I'm rocking the University of Michigan shirt today too for the first episode. Yeah. So that's awesome. I'm a huge fan of Jamal, a huge fan of Glover as well. But I've been watching more of his interviews leading up to the fights. Just such a cool guy. So what do you think now going forward as the champ? What do you see for his next fight? I know some guys were talking about, depending on the return of what's his name? I'm blanking on his name, but who's
Jiri
Prochazka. Yeah, in terms of his return and the timeline, like what do you think would be the next matchup for Jamahal Hill?
It's funny that you asked me this right now because I was looking through Instagram this morning and I saw Yuri's call out video to Jamahal Hill. And he ends the video with "I'm coming," and then he shouts, "I'm coming!" And Jamal. I mean, Chet pulled up on his Instagram. He made a great comeback video. He's in the woods. He's in the snow. He's talking to Yuri. And at the end of the video, instead of him saying "I'm coming," he said, "That's what she said." So I think that Yuri Jamahal Hill is going to be the next title fight. It's not official, but if there is a fight to make, we're talking. Glover and Yuri fought. I thought they had an incredible fight. I think that Jamahal Hill is going to open up as a bit of a favorite after what he just did to Glover. I think the next title fight is going to be Yuri and Jamahal Hill.
That's going to be so sweet. I'm a huge fan I love Yuri. And I mean, do you have any thoughts? What do you think on how they match up, strengths, weaknesses? What do you think? What do you foresee?
Well, I see this fight as a striking battle. Yuri is a very non-traditional kickboxer. He likes to switch his stance around, but so does Jamahal Hill. And that's where I think Jamahal Hill's athleticism is really going to take him in this fight. I don't see it as a wrestling match. What I'd like to see against Jamahal Hill and Yuri, I'd like to see Jamal mixing his wrestling and grappling because I don't think Yuri's really expecting it that much. And in turn, that'll open up his striking. Jamahal Hill is an incredible striker. I've underestimated his striking since day one, and he keeps impressing me. He keeps knocking people out. As he says, you sleep on me, your doctor's going to be waking up. That's why they sweet dreams, Jamahal Hill. You keep sleeping on me, the doctor's going to wake you up. And time again, he's impressed us. And I mean, really, if it wasn't for how strong Glover's heart is, he would have been knocked out too. This is a great striking matchup. It's hard to say who I see in the edge in the striking department. That's why I'd really like to see Jamahal Hill mixing his wrestling, his grappling to open up his boxing to knock out Yuri moving forward.
It's crazy. And this is another thing I just popped in my mind. I remember hearing too, Jamahal Hill, if I'm not mistaken, I think he just started MMA really as an amateur in 2017. Isn't that right?
No, that can't be right because him and I fought on the same card probably back in 2011, 2012.
Oh, you know what I'm thinking? Sorry, his professional career, I think, began.
Oh, his professional career. Yes, his professional career.
So that's wild to me. So you start 5 years and then you just, boom, make it all the way to the top. That's insane. I think he was ranked 7th as well and fighting for which is that's got to be pretty up there too in terms of your position and when you get a title fight. So I mean, the whole thing is just so cool, and his reaction was amazing, and how emotional he got, I think is I love seeing that when you see like the toughest people in the world like showing their emotions and being vulnerable when they have such a great moment. The whole thing was cool. Last thing I want to ask about Jamahal Hill, because I know some folks have talked about this. I don't think it sounds like it's not going to happen. Alex Pereira, like, what do you think? I don't know about the outcome of that, but what do you think about that as a fight, as a competitive match?
I think it's an incredible matchup. Obviously, Alex Pereira, an incredible striker, knocks out Strong Strickland, comes in, takes the UFC championship by knockout. I mean, I think it's an incredible matchup. With that being said, I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. And when I say we, I don't mean you and I just mean the sport in general of this. Alex Pereira, he's the 185-pound champ. There's plenty of 185-pound fighters that are going to give him fits. Alex needs to not worry too much about Jamahal Hill. I understand he wants to get that win back for his teammate Glover. You saw him there in the corner. He was consoling him after the fight. But I think that's a little down the road. I'd like to see Alex stay at 185 and take on like a wrestler like Colby or Kamzat before making his way to 205 and trying to take on Jamahal Hill.
Right. Okay. All right. Now I want to shift to our next topic, which is, so we had another amazing championship fight for flyweight. Moreno came out on top, and Figueiredo announced during the end of the fight that he's moving up to bantamweight, which I think is really interesting because it's such a stacked division right now. So I just wanted to get your first thoughts, like, and I believe I can't remember who mentioned this, but I think Figueiredo specifically has historically had tough weight cuts. He's a big guy, and I think he had a really tough weight cut this time as well for this fight. I believe it was Michael Bisping that mentioned that, but I can't remember for sure. So what are your thoughts of Figueiredo moving up to bantamweight? How do you think he's going to fare against some of the competition up there?
You know, Figueiredo, again, back to athleticism. You look at the guy, he's carved from marble. He has perfect abs, he has perfect muscles. He's ripped. You know, he's cutting a lot of weight. He's low, his fat level, I can't even imagine, was probably below 4% with how ripped he is. That being said, moving up a weight class, getting up 10 more pounds, is he going to try to just be comfortable and have walk around comfortably, or is he going to try and add on that extra weight to make up for his lack of height? Because you look at this, I mean, how tall is he? He has to be 4'9", 4'10". Like, yeah, I've stood next to the guy, and I'm not a tall guy, and I feel tall next to him. So I think the height is definitely going to play an advantage. But as for athleticism, speed, I mean, man, we can sit here and make our predictions, but until he steps in the cage against a real bantamweight, time's going to tell for us.
It's just such a tough division. I think like people go back and forth being like lightweight versus bantamweight, but those are kind of arguably the two most stacked divisions. So I think it'd be really interesting. And then what do you think? How do you think his trajectory is going to go? Like for his first matchup coming in as a former champ, who do you see them matching him up with?
You know, honestly, I see him, since it's out of his weight class, they're going to label him as, number 2, ranked number 2 or number 3 or whatever he is at that is. I'd really like to see him get his feet wet, not just jump full in. Unfortunately, being the former champ, he's going to have to take on a top 10 guy. But I'd rather see it in the later rankings. Maybe a guy that's coming off his, on his downslide, on the backside of the mountain, maybe an 8, 9, or 10 guy. That's maybe, 1, 2 of his last, or 3 of his last 5, or 2 of his last 5, just to give Figgy a chance to see. Because if he gets in there and he gets demolished by number 10, we're going to find out really quick that he needs to go back down to 25.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. Well, that's going to be exciting and a new transition. Now let's get to the next topic, which is very, very exciting. It's a potential super fight here. It seems like it's going to happen, and it's somebody that you train with, which is also really interesting. So it's Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury, which Tyson just called him out, and a lot of folks are talking about this. And I just have a ton of questions about it, but so they're going to fight in a cage. So he's going to make some concessions, right? Tyson said, we're going to fight in a cage and we're going to use MMA gloves. And I thought this was really, really interesting because I heard prior to him making this announcement, I heard other folks saying that if they used MMA gloves, it would be a different story. I think maybe it was Joe Rogan. Somebody said, hey, like, then it would be interesting because then really that knockout power of Francis will be it'll be more revealed, right? So then I heard Jesse on Fire talking yesterday, and he actually gave the opposite take. He said that the MMA gloves are going to be a benefit to Fury because he's such a surgeon with his punches. So it's going to help him connect more. And it gives Francis less of a chance, or either really, but Francis less of a chance to defend with like the bigger gloves. So as a MMA fighter in terms of striking, like what are your thoughts on that?
When it comes to a situation like this, I always like to say the grass is always greener on the other side. If you're on Francis's team, obviously we're going to have the power. We have the smaller gloves. It only takes one punch with those gloves to knock out. But then you look at the other side of the fence, and just like your buddy's saying, or Michael Bisping was saying, that the smaller gloves, he's a surgeon. He's going to pick Francis, or he could potentially pick Francis apart from a range. But again, having that one-shot knockout power, it just depends on what side of the fence you want to be on. Do you want to be behind Francis in the power, or do you want to be behind the precision striking of Tyson Fury? I think it's an incredible matchup. I think it's a great crossover from boxing to MMA. I still don't see those boxers moving over to MMA. I just think there's too many extra tools to be shown.
Yeah.
And you take Francis, and Francis is, again, an incredible athlete. You look at his knockouts. He just about beheaded the guy hit with the uppercut. Was it Alistair Overeem?
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to think the black guy that called him out, and he ended up knocking him out in like 30 seconds. What's his name? It doesn't matter. But we're getting back to that one-shot knockout power. You look at Tyson Fury. I don't think he has that one-shot knockout power. You see him go 12 rounds to Deontay Wilder. You see him picking them apart. He's not finishing him to the later rounds. With that being said, the longer the fight goes, I feel it's in Tyson's Fury, but Francis will have the advantage in the first couple rounds.
I think it's what I will say this, what I'm really, really happy about, and Fury doesn't have to do this, but that the fact that he is trying to get at least edge a little closer to something that Francis is used to, because it just, to me, and I'll watch it no matter what, because I'm fascinated by it. But to me, I feel like there should be some concessions. Like, let's get to the middle versus, hey, otherwise you're just asking Francis to straight up jump into his sport. And it's like, it's a total disadvantage. But at least here, he's trying to make a little bit of a concession. Again, I guess it's maybe still up in the air in terms of who it favors more. But I like that idea of, hey, now he's got more of a chance to use that knockout power. But if in a perfect world, if we're trying to make it a little bit more fair, and like you said, a lot of boxers are not going to come into MMA because it's just so different, right? Like your stance has to be different because now you're anticipating kicks and all these. I mean, it's just tons more places where strikes can come from, grappling, all that stuff. So probably they wouldn't come. I get that, but like I know that there's been other crossovers where they make a couple more concessions. I want to get your thoughts on this. Like, for example, allowing like more strikes in the clinch or something like that. Or I think one organization once allowed, I think they allowed elbows or like something like that. Like if you had to give one more concession into the rule set to sort of make it more of a hybrid, make it more fair for Francis, like what do you think would make the most sense?
Ooh, honestly, I think those short elbows in there too, from a clinch position, the dirty boxing, because, Francis has been there a long time. Now, on the flip side of that coin is you look at Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. I can't remember the second or the third time they fought. Talking about Tyson's game plan. His game plan was just to tie him up. He said, I was going to tie him up for 6 rounds, get those arms tired. I could see him having a similar game plan for Francis, because once he takes that power and that speed and that agility away, then what? And, Tyson isn't a small guy. He's going to stand there chest to chest with Francis, and I feel like he's going to try to push him up into the cage. It's tough to say what would be. I mean, if you want to say, honestly, put in leg kicks. Just do leg kicks. Let's do boxing with leg kicks, and then we'll really get to see no head kicks, no body kicks, just leg kicks. But I know that won't happen. What would be really interesting too is if they did like what they did with Demetrius Johnson in one. First round kickboxing, second round MMA, third round kickboxing, fourth round MMA, fifth round kickboxing. They gave it to this great Thai fighter, this incredible fighter. And Demetrius Johnson, you don't see him on the run very often, but during those kickboxing rounds, he was on the run. And then when the MMA takeover, he was able to take him down and finish. But even to play 2 to 5 or 2 to 3 rounds with Francis. Hey, 2 rounds of MMA, 3 rounds of boxing, on off. Make sure they know. I think that would be fair. I don't think Tyson goes for that because the ground is going to be. He's going to be, he's going to be sinking, in the water once it hits the ground. So I don't think he's going to give that up. But with that being said, I think that would be the most fair way to do it.
That would be so interesting. Or even if you didn't do, like, let's say it wouldn't be the most fair, but I actually love the idea of maybe, let's say the first round boxing, second round boxing plus leg kicks or something like that. So he doesn't have to go totally out of his comfort zone where he's wrestling, where he'd be basically like completely helpless on the ground, right?
But with that being said, and I'm sorry to cut you off here.
No, go for it.
When you're talking about, well, it wouldn't be completely fair. Well, I mean, it's already 2 rounds to 3 rounds, so Tyson only has to do it for 2 rounds when Francis has to box for 3. And and you can say that, oh, well, boxing is MMA. No, it's not. Boxing and MMA, striking are totally different. Your stance is different, like you mentioned before. Your punches come different. They're faster. You don't have to throw as much power. Boxing and MMA boxing, I mean, they're 2 different sports. Let's just say it the way it is.
Yes.
Like they're not the same. And the casual fan doesn't understand that. So when they think, oh, well, he's barely changing the element. No, he's changing everything. He's changing his hands. He's changing his hand placement. He's changing his foot placement. He's changing his head movement. In MMA, we do have head movement, but it's not, you don't see guys put their hands down like Floyd Mayweather and left, right, back, down. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just doesn't, because you always have that kick coming. So we're taught more to absorb, to block, than we actually are to move. And again, that's not 100%. So we do move our head, but it's just not the same as boxing.
Right. No, absolutely. The last thing I want to say on this is the thing that always fascinates me about this, and I'm not trying to throw shade at boxing, but it's always like when we do these crossover fights, it always has to be try to get it as far away from MMA as possible, because if you just stripped away everything, everybody knows, I don't know how you feel about this, but everybody knows the mixed martial artist is going to just have a massive advantage against the boxer. It's just another reason why I think MMA is the coolest sport in the world, because it's like to fight a mixed martial artist, there's always has to be concessions on their side to make it somewhat competitive, versus you go the other way. Anyways, that always fascinates me. I even remember, Yeah,
you are spot on with that. Mm-hmm. You look at all these, and look at MMA fighters to boxers. Just like we mentioned before, and I think a point you're trying to get at is we're always trying to make concessions for the boxer. We're not, MMA fighters like, fuck it, let's just go, let's run it. You know what? Oh, those you want? Those are the rules you want? No, I'm showing up. And you know what? I think these MMA fighters, Tyrone Woodley, Ben Askren, you look down the list. That's just 2 I can think off the top of my head. But they showed up in another world, in another sport, to display the craft that they've built from another. But they're not boxers. Ben Askren, he probably maybe boxed 30 minutes in his whole life. The guy comes in with a jab, shoots and takedown. Now he's fighting Jake Paul, and he got a lot of flack. Oh, he got knocked out. Hey, well, Tyrone Woodley was a knockout artist in the UFC. He gets knocked out. That was not trust me, I know Tyrone personally. That was not a fake knockout. That was not a throw from him. He got clipped, man. These boys can box. But you look at these professional boxers want all these stipulations to advantage them. MMA fighters say, hey, let's show up, let's make some money, and let's fight.
You know what's funny? And you mentioned Ben Askren. I love Ben Askren. I just heard yesterday, and I'm blanking on who said this in one of the interview shows. I watch everything, and he was basically saying, yeah, I was kind of worried about Ben going into this boxing match, because when they used to train boxing, on days that they would train boxing in the gym or striking, he said Ben would just be chilling, like just hanging out and not really getting into it. And he was just like, nah, I'll wait for sparring. And that's that's just how he was. He was so dominant. So that's actually pretty funny. But yeah, so I'm really curious to see how that one goes. All right. Let's move on to the 4th topic, and this comes courtesy of Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour Monday. He talked about he had Coach Kavanaugh on, which was really cool. Talked about the Johnny Walker fight, which was amazing. But he said that Conor will return this year, and he said he would bet the house that Conor returns this year. And of course, so we got to talk about Conor. And I had I know a couple of potential matchups have been talked about. Then I got one that I don't think anybody's really mentioned, but I think will be really interesting, though I doubt it will happen. So first, the main names that have been thrown around: Chandler, Gaethje, Oliveira. What do you think makes the most sense for Conor's return fight, or what do you think will happen?
I think we need to toss Oliveira right out the mix. If Dana White marks in, Conor McGregor versus Oliveira, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. He's going to get subbed. He's going to get taken down. He's going to get out grappled. He might drop Oliveira, come in for the finish, maybe waves him up, but I just don't see that going the well. I mean, and not to mention Oliveira can strike too. And, Conor's been off for a long time. Honestly, I'm a big Justin Gaethje fan. For a long time, he was my favorite fighter. I got to train with him. I got to spar with him. He's a great guy. I like him a lot. But he's getting he's taking a lot of big shots. I think this is somebody that can get in there. I think that is going to stand. He's a wrestler transitioning, to striking, in the last several years. I think he's going to do an Eddie Alvarez. He's going to try. I think that's the best matchup because, Justin Gaethje isn't going to try to take him down. He's going to stand and bang. He's going to absorb shots. And Conor has that power in that left hand to sleep him with one punch. So I think as a business, I think the UFC needs to make Justin Gaethje versus Conor McGregor. Gaethje's done an incredible amount for the sport since transitioning over to the UFC from the World Series of Fighting or now the PFL. I think it'd be a great payday for him. I think it'd be a great day, and it'd just be an exciting fight, and we can sell that fight. Chandler, I'd like to think Chandler would be a little bit smarter and try to engage in more grappling, unlike Eddie Alvarez did. But I think Chandler has that kind of base, or he's going to take that leg. He's really going to test the durability in that leg because let me tell you from firsthand experience, Mike Chandler can kick like a fucking mule. And when he kicks those legs, there's doing a lot of damage. And, how's Conor's leg? After that nasty break, although it's his back leg, it's his left leg. If if Mike Chandler starts chopping that leg up, and not to mention Justin Gaethje has some nasty leg kicks as well. But I think Chandler will probably be a little bit smarter and try to engage in some grappling and some wrestling more than Justin Gaethje will.
I think, I would be either matchup is so exciting to me. I would lean a little bit, just like I love Mike Chandler, but I would say I'm a bigger fan of Gaethje, but man, that would be so cool to have Conor versus Gaethje. Plus, I don't know, that whole thing would be amazing. But I think both will be really cool fights. Dustin Poirier said recently, when talking about Chandler versus Conor, he said he favored Conor in that fight, and then maybe I don't know. The whole thing is a trip. Okay, so I'm so excited for his return. So I'm a big Conor McGregor fan as well. But what about this? I don't think the UFC will make this. But what about because Conor's been out for a while, he had the whole thing. How about Conor versus Patty?
Oh,
No?
I think Patty is doing an incredible job with marketing himself, but he has to earn his stripes. Prior to his last fight, I think his combined opponent UFC record was like 1-3. All right. Patty looked good against Lovett. Lovett gassed out after the first round. But, man, I just don't – I think Conor just starches him.
I think so, too.
I think that you would be killing two headliners of the same – out of the USA. Where's Patty exactly from?
UK. I think Liverpool.
Oh, from Liverpool. All right.
Yeah.
So why take two guys from the UK and have them fight and – kill one of them essentially, or you can try to build them up and then maybe make a super fight in a couple of years. But that's not. You get what I'm trying to say. Like there's no point of killing two super. Or if they fight, one of them's dead. One of them is if Patty beats Conor, Conor's career is over. Nobody cares to watch him fight anymore. If Patty loses to Conor, you just lost to Conor McGregor, who hasn't fought in 3 years and he's 1-4 in his last 5. I think it's a bad idea. I really personally, again, I like the Gaethje matchup because it's going to be fireworks and Conor can knock Gaethje out and Gaethje might clip Conor as well. But the Pimblett, I just don't like it because I just think it's a bad business move.
No, you're 100% right. Only reason why I thought is because they're both so interesting, and just because Conor's had the layoffs, so maybe come back against some. That was my only thought. Absolutely. And it's a little tongue in cheek, but yeah, okay. Well, I can't wait for that. All right, now we get to the final topic, February 11th. I'm going to be having a huge watch party for this. I cannot wait for this fight and for the headliner, Islam versus Volkanovski. I've been trying to listen to as many interviews, people talking about this as possible, but yeah, I don't know. Like, first of all, how like as an MMA fighter, what's your excitement level for this fight?
I think most of these people, most of our viewers aren't going to really like my answer here. I think this fight is being overhyped. We're talking about, I think Volkanovski is an incredible fighter. I think he's dynamic. He's fast. As I've mentioned before, I keep using the word athletes. You know what I mean? But you're in the UFC. You're a freaking athlete. Volkanovski is an incredible athlete, but he's going up a weight class against a guy that just handled Oliveira. He hasn't lost in a hot minute. Oliveira's been hot. He's been red hot. And not only did he just handle him, he submitted him. I don't like the looks for Volkanovski. I mean, he's a short fighter. I really think this is going to come down to the grappling. I know Brian Ortega had Volk in bad trouble with that mounted guillotine. Unfortunately, if our Russian fighter gets to that position, he's not letting go and he's finishing that choke. I think it's going to be a great fight. I think it's an exciting fight. But I think the easy money here is our Russian favorite, is our champion.
Now, again, like I'm not the expert, but that's kind of where I would go to. That's what I would definitely favor Islam. But like you mentioned the height. So he's actually shorter. I've heard people say that, and again, you're the expert here. So does the height actually, the shorter stature actually benefit Volkanovski in terms of takedown defense, or what do you think?
It's all personality, man. It's all just style matchups, to be honest. Some people say, "Oh man, you're so lucky because you're 5'7" and you can torque that hook over." Yeah, I might be 5'7", but I have a 67-inch reach compared to a Devontae Smith who has a 76-inch reach, or 78-inch reach. So again, back to the theory of grass is always greener on the other side. I think Islam's just going to pick him apart from afar. Volkanovski is going to try to, as he's coming in, that's when he's going to look for his takedown. This fight could just go so many ways. We can sit here and make our predictions, what we think is going to happen. And then the week after the fight, we're like, wow, I wasn't even close, because it's going to be that dynamic. We're talking about two of the best in the world. Volkanovski, pound for pound, the best fighter in the world as of right now. Islam, he's right on his coattails, up a weight class. As a betting man, as a gambling man, I'm taking Islam to the bank.
Me too, but that's why I think that's why it's so exciting too. And Islam's striking was amazing against Oliveira, and so now it's just gonna be wild, and he's gonna have that reach advantage. I mean, I do think it's heavily favors Islam, but I'm so fascinated by the fight. So yeah, this is super cool. Lastly, I think it was announced officially. Who knows? This might change, but I think it's now official that Khabib won't be in Islam's corner, per his announcement of like stepping away from the sport, spend more time with his family. You think that has any effect, or any significant effect, or what do you think?
Absolutely it does. And I don't know why he did that. I tried to look up some reasons of, hey, why are you stepping away from the sport? The most I found, is just because for family reasons, for religious reasons. Ali Abiz, he trains at Extreme Couture. Maybe for our show, I'll ask him personally why, and he might give me a roundabout answer. But for the inside of it. But back to coaching. Robert Follis was the head coach at Extreme Couture for a long time. Unfortunately, he passed away in the middle of like 2 or 3 guys' camps. Brian Caraway, close friend of mine. I mean, he said mentally it was the worst moment of his life, because it's somebody that he counts on, somebody he looks to for answers. When he feels in doubt, he looks to his head coach, somebody he's been working with. Islam looks, this is just another wrench in the gears. This is just another wrench in the gears to make it more interesting of a fight. Mm-hmm. But again, he's going to be looking to Khabib for that comfort, that knowledge, that experience, and he just lost that. So, yeah. I mean, this is a big move right now.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, as a fan, I'm such a fan of Khabib. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. I got a bunch of favorites. I can't say one, but he's one of my all-time favorites. And I just love him being in the sport, just being there, seeing him. So it's kind of a disappointment just from a fan perspective, but I totally get his reasons and rationale to spend more time with his family. I think Javier Mendez mentioned that, I think last year or something, so it was something like this. He only was able to be with his family for 3 weeks out of the year because he's just so busy, and everybody's trying to do stuff with him and make deals and all this stuff. He's just on top of the world right now. So I get that. But yeah, I was just like, man, when I heard that, because it was a bummer when he retired. Like, so I came out of the blue. I was so disappointed. But then when he came back as a coach, you're like, oh, cool, he's still involved. So I guess it is what it is, and we'll see what happens. All right. Well, this is basically it for our first show. Those are our 5 topics. I thought that was super fun. And like I said, and every week, Justin's the expert. I'm going to be learning and asking questions. And yeah, I hope you guys can learn too and enjoy the show. So that is it. Thank you guys so much for joining. If you want to see more, because we're going to be doing weekly shows, make sure to click that subscribe button. If you like the video, click that like button. And we will see you in the next episode. Take it easy.